The Flashing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Welcome to Oh, Mr. Sheffield, episode 21. This week we're talking about Frannie's Choice. I am Shawn DePasquale here with...
Toria Sheffield.
Uh-oh. I don't know what that was. Frannie's Choice, season 1, episode 21, directed by Paul Miller. We shift over this week to a new director, Paul Miller. And then this episode was written by Tracy Newman and Jonathan Stark. This was a freaking awesome episode. I loved this episode.
Good.
So good. This episode does so many things. It calls back to the pilot. It sets up the future of the series. It addresses an elephant in the room that we are going to spend a considerable amount of time talking about.
Well, I just want to say, this is the episode where Fran's ex comes back into the picture, forcing her to choose between her old life and the Sheffield. I always just like to ground us in what's happening.
And I know I've said this before, but I am really glad that they didn't decide to make Val the person that Fran's ex cheated on her with. Because then we would have been deprived of the name Heather Biblo, which is great every time it's mentioned. And we would have been deprived of Val. And I really like that character. I like that actress. So.
Well, also, my very first note is, I think they teed up this episode so perfectly over the last 20 episodes. I'm almost like this should have been the season finale. We can get into it later, but I almost wonder if this was supposed to be the season finale. But it's like the emotional payoff in this episode is genuinely so good. And it came at just the perfect time in this series.
This episode made me cry.
Oh my God, no, me too. I got teary-eyed twice.
Okay.
But so the episode starts with it's like Friday night at the Sheffield mansion, and literally everybody except Fran has plans, to the point where even little Gracie has a dinner date with some boy named Brendan, which made me laugh, or Bernard or something like that. And then I don't know if you actually flagged this as weird, but Fran is left alone, and then there's a knock at the door, and it's Val. And Val literally goes, "I knew you'd be home. I brought single white female and a box of Slim Fast bars." My note is really quickly, and I know I'm nitpicking, and I know this is annoying to do when watching a fun show like this, but don't you think it's weird that Val would have gone all the way from Queens to Manhattan without knowing for sure that Fran would be there?
No, because I think that was like Val's character. You know what I mean? Like, she's just like that annoying friend who's just like, I just made this drive all the way out here, assuming you'd be home. And I feel like the reverse of this would have been if she wasn't home. The next time she talked to Fran, she would be annoyed with Fran for not being home. I also really like that she brought over single white female.
Yeah,
very nice, very period appropriate film.
Mm-hmm. And they also then discuss the big news of the episode, which is that Fran's ex, Danny, has broken up with Heather Biblo. And not only have they broken up, but apparently Danny has not stopped talking about and asking about Fran. So Val is like, Fran, you should go back to that bridal shop and like you should talk to Danny. And Fran's like, no way, he cheated on me. He fired me, blah, blah, blah. And then Val's like, yeah, but Fran, you could dump him this time.
Yeah.
And Fran is like, on second thought, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
Which is like so perfect. And it sets us up for the next part of the episode. She goes to this bridal shop, and Val, she has the kids with her, and Val's like, come on, kids, let's go check the payphones for quarters and get them out of there. And Danny instantly is like, Fran, like, you look amazing. You look so great. And he's like, I've been thinking so much about you. And honestly, like, that time with Heather, that all that did was make me appreciate what we had. And he's like, tell me that you don't want me. And she's like, I don't want you. And then he kisses her. And I wrote, that was a heated kiss. Like, we have not seen this heat register of heat on this show once before.
Yeah,
this.
that was En Fuego.
En Fuego. I don't know if those actors had chemistry. I don't know what was going on, but it was almost, I felt obscene for sitcom television. But
I liked it. I rewound it and watched it twice.
Well, you are immoral and I wouldn't have
No,
let you watch.
it really was it was a very heated kiss, and then it leads to like more back and forth, and then like they kiss again, and I mean ultimately she she sort of says like you're not serious about me, and then she's like, if you were, you would marry me, and then he gets down on his knee and he proposes to her with no ring, by the way. There's never a ring given to her. He just proposes to her, and she's like, okay, she like sort of reluctantly says yes.
No, she says, I'll think about it. Because when they were going back and forth, she's like, I'm not wasting another 3 years of my life waiting for you not to ask me to marry me. And then he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to ask you right now. And he does. And she's like,
so then she goes to her mom's house wearing an insane silver jacket that normally the fashion on the show, I'm not a fashion guy, but like it looked like those blankets that they wrap around you when like you have like a traumatic incident.
You like run a marathon.
Or like run a marathon, or like if you're rescued from like a crashed airplane, and then they put those silver blankets on you and put you in the back of an ambulance and drive you away. That's what the jacket looked like. She looked fabulous in it, but that's what it looked like. And then she tells Sylvia like, I might be getting married, and Sylvia jumps up and immediately starts singing like it's like a Hebrew song that they sing it like that they sing at weddings. She's like Simon Tov and Mazel Tov and Mazel Tov and Simon Tov.
Well, but here's what actually happens is Fran comes in and says, she goes, I've been proposed to. And that's when her mother jumps up, starts doing this dance that Fran says, she's like, Mom, stop, you're gonna make it rain. Basically insinuating that it was like a Native American rain dance.
Yeah.
And literally Sylvia goes, your father and I have been waiting for this moment since the day you were born. Now we can finally die. And she opens the kitchen door and yells into the living room, Morty, you can start smoking again. And but then
I loved that. That got an actual LOL out of me.
Yeah, but it gets revealed that Sylvia, throughout this conversation, thought that Mr. Sheffield had proposed to Fran because, Sylvia's like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this for so long. Your father and I were wondering when this was going to happen. Turns out she had no idea they were talking about Danny. She thought they were talking about Mr. Sheffield. And then that actually led to this really great like meta exchange between Fran and her mom where Fran goes, what? Mom, no, not Mr. Sheffield. She goes, the boss never marries the help. Look at Tony and Angela. So there's a who's the boss reference. And then
now is when we need to stop and talk about this, because there's a contingent of human beings that believe that this show directly ripped off Who's the Boss, to the point where someone wrote on IMDb's trivia page, finally, exclamation point. Fran mentions Tony and Angela, which are, of course, the characters from the sitcom she plagiarized with The Nanny, Who's the Boss. Many episodes are the same premise and or bear the same carbon-copied titles, and even the same guest stars were hired, sometimes to play similar roles in both. We have to have a serious discussion about this, Toria.
But we already touched on this a couple episodes ago. Where
it's not Who's the Boss.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, this faction of nanny viewers might as well be like flat earthers. Like I don't really acknowledge them. They don't affect me day to day.
They're like Snyder Cut fans.
That is the much geekier metaphor
reference
to mine.
People know.
But I'm like, you know what? If you really believe that, then like I'm not going to try to convince you, even though. Shawn, I will say this to you and our listeners, as we said last time, like if you believe that you have like no appreciation for the nuance, the feminist perspective, the fashionista perspective, the fact that there's such a like undercurrent, not even an undercurrent, an overcurrent of like Jewish American humor.
How about the fact that Tony had a daughter on that show? He went into that equation with Angela, who also had a son. On par, because they were both grieving the loss of their previous, I think his wife died and her husband left her. or vice versa, but like they were both going through, like it's not even similar.
No,
Like this is just
like
the only similarities is right. It's about like they're both about housekeepers, I guess, except that like she's a nanny and he literally was the housekeeper. He wasn't there to raise the children at all. Like
this is exactly as if, and this is sort of what I said the other day. It would be like if I was like, ugh, I hate How I Met Your Mother. It's such a Friends ripoff. And it's like, no, they're just two shows that happen to have groups of friends in them. And the comedy, the style, the
premise is different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes. So I think I'm going to put this to bed right now and say that those lunatics do not exist to me.
Unless you're a listener of the show, in which case we're happy to debate this with you on our Twitter account at Mr. Chef Pod.
2 F's though. Okay, so we covered that, but back to this very meta exchange where Fran's like, "Mom, the boss never marries the help. Look at Tony and Angela." But then Sylvia goes, "Major Nelson married Jeannie," which is of course an I Dream of Jeannie reference, and Fran goes, "If she had any commitment to that relationship, she would have given up her apartment." Then Sylvia goes, "It was a bottle. They kept it on top of the TV." and then Fran just is like, "What am I even saying?" And like they just get so derailed.
It's so good. The defensiveness with which she delivers that line is really what sells it the best. It's just she gets so defensive. She's like, Renee Taylor gets so defensive. It's perfect delivery. She's like, "It was a bottle. They kept it on top of the TV." Like,
yeah, it's just I loved this exchange. It was so funny and like absurd. And
we got to get Renee Taylor on this pod. I'll die if we can get Renee Taylor. I will literally die. That will be the last episode of this podcast. Yeah.
I would absolutely love that. We should go to her house. I bet you she's in LA.
We should go to her house.
No, I mean, if we
uninvited, we should just be, "Hi, we do a podcast. Do you want to be on it?"
We break through the back window. No, if we ever get her on, we would do the courtesy of not making her have to figure out Zoom.
Oh God, I would do anything. I would literally do, like, she could call and just leave a really long voicemail, which she pre-anticipates what our questions are, and we have the hard work of cutting ourselves in, asking questions that she's already answered.
Oh, but so basically, the thing that we should actually talk about is that this moment crystallizes what's really going on with Fran emotionally. She looks at her mom and she's like, "Mom, the thing is, when Danny proposed," because it gets revealed that it was actually Danny, and Fran's like, "When Danny proposed to me, all I could think about was how much I would miss those kids." And this is the emotional, center of the episode. What is she going to do? And Fran's mom says, "I understand that, Fran, but don't you ultimately want a life of your own, like with your own kids?" And Fran's like, I guess you're right. So I guess my answer is yes. This is a big, big moment though in the canon of this season, because then we cut to, so Fran is talking to Niles about this. Niles is the only person she's told. And, they're chopping vegetables together. And Niles actually makes a couple little snide comments that make it clear that he thinks this is a mistake, but he's not coming out outright and saying it. He's basically saying things like, she's like, "Oh, Danny doesn't really like Manhattan." And then Niles is like, "Yes, because Manhattan famously has very little to offer." And is making these little jabs at him and is sort of insinuating that Fran has outgrown him as a person. But again, doesn't come out right and say it. And then he's like, "Well, you have to tell Mr. Sheffield." So she walks into Mr. Sheffield's office. Cece is sitting there working with him. And she's like, "Mr. Sheffield, I'm getting married." Cece jumps up in euphoria, is like, I'm so happy for you.
Very excited. She starts running around.
Yes. Because, in her mind, it's like, oh my God, yes, this means Fran's going to be out of the picture completely. And she's no longer going to be a threat to my relationship.
Cece goes, "I have so many people I have to call," which I thought was a really funny line, considering it means, I guess she's going to call people to be like, "Good news, I'm back in."
Yes, right. Absolutely. So she runs out. And then I loved this moment. Basically, Mr. Sheffield at first is trying to really keep his composure. And he's like, well, congratulations, Miss Fine. who's the lucky man? And she's like, oh, Danny. At which point he literally jumps up from his chair and he's like, how could you? Like after he cheated on you and left you for Heather Biblow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was such a horrible moment.
It's so funny. I'm glad you clocked that too. Mr. Sheffield yelling out the words Heather Biblow.
Well, yeah, because it also shows that
he's so invested.
Yes, as much as he always seems like pretends he doesn't care, he's clearly he not only has been like hanging on every detail of that, but he's genuinely indignant that somebody did that to Fran. And then he recollects himself because Fran's like, well, I figured if I could forgive him, like you could. And so he kind of realizes he overstepped a line, and he then attempts to be really, really gracious again. He like reins it in. He's like, of course. And he's like, well, I congratulate you, and I would love to help you with your honeymoon. And he like extends his hand, and they shake. And there was just like
they shake each other's hands, we should say, not like he extends his hands and they start shaking.
No. Yes, they shake hands, and it's this very sort of dignified, understated moment where you can tell there's a lot happening emotionally beneath the surface. And I wrote, I got a little choked up during this moment.
Oh, this wasn't the part that made me cry, but
it was no. The next part was worse, but basically
the grace part, right?
Oh my god. But then he was like, well, now he said, do you want me to be there when you tell the children? Which is like this whole other layer. And actually my stomach sank right when hers did. And she was like, do we have to tell them? Yeah. And he's like, I think they'll notice that you're gone.
She goes, can't we just tell them I'm on vacation? And then he's like, no, but you'll be gone for like a long time. She goes, well, then can't we just tell them I'm doing my makeup? Yeah. Which was a great...
Yes.
Great escalation.
But so we walk into the kitchen with Mr. Sheffield and Fran. And the children are just like innocently like doing their homework, totally unaware of what's about to happen. And Fran sits down and she's like, hey, like, do you kids remember Danny? And, Maggie's like, oh yeah, that backstabbing jerk. And Fran's like, yeah, that's the one. Well, he's getting married and you're all invited. And they're all like, oh, cool. That's great. And then she's like, and she basically is like, and he's getting married to me. And I mean, Brighton, this was a great moment for Brighton. Like his face falls. Like this kid is hurt. And
he immediately like crumbles this piece of paper that he's like coloring or drawing, and he like throws it on the table, and he's like, no, like, he's a little mad.
More understated. He's mad, but it's slightly more understated at first. And Maggie's also sort of like, you can see her face fall. And then the heartbreaking moment is a little Gracie because she's like, oh, you're getting married? And she's like, but your closet is already so full as it is. That's going to be tough. And then meaning in her little 7-year-old brain, she doesn't compute that means that Fran has to leave.
Yeah, it's really sweet.
She's assuming that means Danny's moving in. And then in fact, Fran's like, oh, well, Danny won't be living here. And she's like, well, that's not going to be good on a marriage.
There's no, it's adorable that there's no version of this in her mind where they're going to lose Fran until it becomes like undeniable. Oh, this means we're going to lose Fran. It's really well written. It's again, one of the few times on the show where they write the kids like kids, and they seem to do that best with this character.
This episode is brought to you by Snapple. Welcome to the Snapple Market Auditory Experience. Close your eyes. Imagine you're walking into your neighborhood store. You make your way to the back and reach for your favorite Snapple flavor. You can't wait. You take a sip. Whoa, that's a lot of flavor. What flavor are you holding? Now open your eyes and check out Snapple.com to find ridiculously flavorful Snapple near you.
Oh, but there was also, did you clock that really dirty joke directed at Cece?
A fifth of scotch and a pack of batteries?
Yes. So so the kids are devastated, and Cece, who is still like over the moon about this, she's completely not reading the room well. But she's like, oh, kids, don't worry. You know what cheers me up when I'm down? And Fran goes, a fifth of scotch and a pack of batteries. And I just wrote, wow, wow, wow.
I liked it. It was savage. But there's an even better line, I think, in this scene. coming up after the kids leave the kitchen, because
Okay.
then we get Mr. Sheffield and Niles talking.
Well, no. That's actually
Right.
that's actually in the next a few days later when they are interviewing new nannies to replace Fran.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yes.
So wait, but there's
And-
what is there between that and this?
So that's it. It's just basically like the children run out and Mr. Sheffield and Fran run after them, and we don't see what ends up happening, but we cut to several days later.
Yeah.
And Mr. Sheffield and Niles are in Mr. Sheffield's office, and they're finishing up an interview with a replacement for Fran. And the woman leaves, and Mr. Sheffield goes, "Oh, she was awful. No style, no sense of humor, and her hair was strangely flat." Like clearly, like the only acceptable version of a nanny now is Fran. And that's when Niles tries to like gently and subtly intervene. And this is my big laugh out loud moment when they're sort of talking about Fran and falling in love and if she's making the right decision leaving and blah, blah, blah. And Niles like looks off into the distance and goes, "I was in love once." and you would think it's going to be like this moment where, you know, Mr. Sheffield like looks up and is like, "Go on." But then you realize Mr. Sheffield has instantly gone
listening.
back to his work on his desk the second that Niles tries to be vulnerable. and it's just like, I just wrote like, it sucks to be Niles. Nobody cares about his personal life or his internal world.
Well, and then though it gets worse because then he's like, Niles goes, "I said I was almost in love once," and
he says, "I was in love once."
Yeah, and Mr. Sheffield looks up and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Were you trying to tell me something very personal about?" And so then he tells him this story where you find out that he was like in love with this housekeeper, and that eventually Mr. Sheffield's family or Mr. Sheffield fired her, and he never got to like have his, Niles never got to have
Catherine left. Catherine left for like another post or something.
Well, no, because the line hinges on, he's like, I could have had a life. And then Mr. Sheffield goes, "If Catherine had ever cleaned behind the refrigerator, you might have had a life." And it's the most savage thing Mr. Sheffield's ever said. It's like, whoa, dude, does that mean you knew and you just fired her because she was a terrible housekeeper? Yeah, because he even says, he goes, "We all knew, Niles." He's like, everybody knew. And then he shortly after that acknowledges like, "But we fired her because she wasn't a good cleaner, so too bad." Like,
yes, yeah, okay,
you stole your chance at happiness.
You're actually totally right.
And then we get this scene that made me cry.
Oh yeah, okay. This is the scene. Okay,
which is everyone is gathered to say goodbye to Fran, and we get the kids. We get at the very top of the scene. We get a quick, update where the kids are like, "Are you sure we can't just like make Fran stay?" And Mr. Sheffield's like, even this is after having his conversation with Niles. He's like, no, like we're her friend, and we have to do what's best for her and what makes her happy, and that makes us good friends. And it's like a nice lesson that he's teaching the kids. Albeit he's wrong in this situation. And then Fran shows up, Fran comes downstairs with her luggage, and Danny shows up and he's like, "Come on, babe, hurry up. I'm double parked," which I really like that one. And basically the whole scene kind of reinforces what an oaf he is. As at the same time, all of the kids sort of express how much Fran means to them and how much they're going to miss Fran. And, and Gracie says, I wrote you a poem. Can I read you this poem?" And she reads this very sweet poem. And she goes, "F is for the fun we have together. R is for the rummy we play. A is for the answers to my questions. And N is for the nasal things you say." And it literally it got me so choked up. I thought it was so beautiful. And then Fran goes, "Ah," like in her most nasally.
And this goodbye scene, like it is hard. It's like, she's hugging everyone. You can tell that even Niles, Niles is trying so hard not to show that this affects him, but they're just all,
they're all connecting.
sad.
Like her and Niles have like this good burn on CC where they both say the same thing at the same time. And then they're like jinx. And then they like hook pinkies. Like they're really selling like these people are a family. And now she's ripping the heart of the family out, which is herself, after she just repaired all the damage that these people, she's going to make them suffer another loss. And then, She doesn't. Spoiler alert. She does, because the show goes on for 6 more seasons.
5 more seasons.
Yeah, I can't do math.
But so the way that
I'm a podcast host, not a mathematician, Toria.
But you do have a degree in math.
Yes, I do, but it was a complete accident. But that's a story for another time.
That's a double joke. Sean dropped out of art school. So.
She's trying to like ding me for dropping out of college, but then couldn't form words or get them out.
Whatever. I have a degree. I have a college degree. I'm really smart.
You have college degree.
This gets resolved because basically they're about to say goodbye, and then Brighton is just basically like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to pretend that this is good news. Like, this sucks and I hate you. And, Mr. Sheffield's like, Brighton, stop. And then Maggie, even though she's like, 15 years old, she breaks down too. And she's like, no, Dad, like, I know you told us to pretend to be happy about this, but we're not. And Fran looks at Mr. Sheffield and she's like, you told them to lie about their feelings? Like, I'm not even out the door and you're already making mistakes. And then Mr. Sheffield kind of loses it. And he's like, but I did it for you. And he's like, you think it's easy for us to see you leave and waste your life on that Neanderthal?
And Danny goes, huh?
Yeah, right? So it's like literally even Mr. Sheffield couldn't keep it together. And it was just such a great moment. And Fran kind of looks at the family and she looks at Danny and she just goes, I don't want to go. And she looks at Danny and she's like, Danny, I don't want to hurt you, but I think I've outgrown you.
Yep.
Which was great. It's a great message. It's a great lesson.
Everything about it is handled so well. And then they immediately pull you back in with, he turns around and he looks at Cece and is like, hey, what are you up to? And Fran goes, 2 seconds, time heals all wounds. Like, yes. So you don't even feel bad for Danny by the end of it because he sucks so apparently bad,
Yep. And so he storms out and Mr. Sheffield's just like, oh, and they all hug and they embrace. And Mr. Sheffield's like, well, like, let's celebrate the 4 seasons. And as they're all leaving, he kind of takes Fran aside and he's like, I just, Miss Fine, I just want to make sure that you don't feel like you made a mistake. And she just kind of, there's like a beat where she thinks and then very confidently goes, I didn't. And that's the end. It's like freeze frame. And that's the end of the episode.
Yeah. I think it's time for segments.
I think it's time for segments.
And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria.
All right. Now, what was your favorite? There were so many good lines. I feel like we mentioned a lot of them throughout the episode, throughout our sort of recap. I think of all of them. We've been waiting for this since you were born. Now we can die. Morty, you can start smoking again. That was the highlight for me.
That's the first thing I have flagged as well. Yeah. I have Sylvia. We forgot to mention that when Sylvia starts doing her celebratory Jewish dance, it does start to rain. That made me laugh.
Yes, that was fun.
We talked about the Niall saying I was in love once. And Mr. Sheffield literally just opening a book as he starts talking. The only other one that we hadn't flagged yet that was really funny to me is when Danny gets to the mansion at the end of the episode and walks in, he hands his keys to Niles because Niles is going to bring their suitcases out. And Danny goes, it's the powder blue van with Danny's Parisian blinds for less on the side. And Niles just goes, thank you. I could have been wandering out there for hours. Just dry. It wasn't even like the funniest line, but I'm just like, I love Niles.
Love Niles.
And that was it for me. I loved this episode. My favorite scenes were definitely when Fran had to have these emotional beats with the family. They worked so well.
Do you think they could have pulled off a Niles spinoff show?
Mr. Belvedere?
No, like just like about his life when he's not in the house.
Oh,
because
no, I don't. I mean, granted, they do have like Frasier, which is about just a white man, but I don't think we want to see Niles. He's great in concentrated doses.
What if they could have found some convoluted situation where Niles and Cece had to move into an apartment together?
I think you would make the mistake. It's the Joey mistake.
Mhm.
Joey works when he is one of 6.
Yeah, not when he's number 1.
Yeah, nobody wants all Joey all the time.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah. No, it's a recipe of ingredients that makes a dish.
I agree.
It can't all be Niles paprika.
I agree. Yiddish. I mean, we had this Simmentov and Mazel Tov song, which I really that really delighted me. I love that song. I love the tune of it. Whenever I hear it, I get very excited because it's one of my favorite parts of Jewish events, like wedding or bar mitzvahs, when they do the Simmentov and Mazel Tov, and everyone dances around in a circle, and sometimes you get put in a chair and they lift you up in the air. It's all very exciting.
The Yiddish word that I grabbed onto is Trumbernick.
Yeah.
Sylvia says it about Fran's ex. She goes, he's a real Trumbernick, and that means a troublemaker.
Yeah.
Trumbernick.
And
then the nanny trivia, it's not the most interesting trivia that we've had so far, but it ties into something. Yeah, I really know how to sell it, right? I'm
gonna put a sad trombone there.
No sound effects. I heard you put a goat sound effect into the most recent one I listened to.
That's how we get back from commercial, because it was the closest sound I could find that was sort of like the nanny's laugh.
I don't even think we need a sound separator, but whatever. I'm not in charge of it, so I don't have.
You're not in charge of it, folks. Let us know what you think. Did you find it humorous, or you're like, oh, I'm with Toria, Shawn's a moron, take it out? Because I'll just take him out.
I literally just went, it is so Shawn.
I actually am a bigger fan of the way we go into it, which is just the sound effect that just goes break. It sounds like so.
It just whatever. I'm not gonna get into it right now. But the nanny trivia is so one thing that we didn't mention was that in the scene where Fran is saying goodbye to everybody, she is re-wearing the very outfit that she wears in our promo illustration, the sort of like faux fur leopard print hat with the fur collar. She also wore it in a previous episode and we talked about it. But she's wearing it again in this scene. And I don't know if I would have totally realized that I had already seen it before if I wasn't so familiar with it from our little illustration.
Same.
But the trivia about the show, it's the production recycled Fran finds outfits and had Val Torriello often wear Fran's formerly worn outfits. And the same is true of Sylvia, who often wore her gorgeous neon green scoop neck tee more than once with different clothes. I always think it's funny on IMDb whenever they talk about the clothes, whoever comments on it, like they always add a lot of
specifics.
non-objective. Yeah. But a lot of like non-objective opinion where they'll be like, Fran's like absolutely gorgeous so-and-so, where it's like, is that really a fact or is it opinion? But basically this show often had Fran rewear a lot of the same pieces, but maybe like pairing them with different items, which is not always common for sitcoms.
I'm not against it though. I actually think that it makes more sense, even if it's not something you're clocking consciously. I think it makes more sense in a real world scenario where like you don't just have endless amounts of new clothes. Sometimes you wear the same shirt. No, like sometimes you wear the same pair of jeans. Like sometimes you wear the same pair of jeans 4, 5, 6 days in a row.
Sometimes
that's the nice thing about jeans.
Underwear. Sometimes you wear the same underwear.
Yeah, or no underwear at all. The point is,
well, no, I don't condone them. I think that's gross. That's where I cross the line. But I will say though that we've also seen Mr. Sheffield in this sort of green. It's not a sweater and it's not a button up, but we've seen it. It's like a forest green little thing multiple times.
Spoken like the true fashionista you are. Go on.
Well, I actually think that I noticed in a previous episode, one time he asked her which tie he should wear, and she said, "Go with the green. It matches your eyes." So I do wonder if that actor had really nice green eyes. Like we don't get enough real close-ups of Charles Shaughnessy. Maybe I'll Google him.
No, and honestly, I really want to. This is a good time to mention, like, when are we going to get a 4K restoration of this entire series? You know, why are we watching this in this, like, small format? It's clearly not even HD. It's like, let's go.
Well, you can sometimes see the what are those lines? Those like fuzzy lines on the screen.
You can see the fuzzy lines on the screen sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes
because of how crappy the quality is here.
I kind of like it, though.
They have to do a 4K transfer. I will start a petition. We'll share it on the account. If we can get 1 million signatures, then they'll do it. They'll have to. This is Warner Brothers. They're the same people who released the Snyder Cut. So I feel like we can force them. We'll just be way more polite, you know?
Yeah, because ultimately we need to see those gorgeous green eyes on Mr. Sheffield's face so we can see how well his outfit complements that color.
Thank you, Toria.
And then for the Fran of the CC, I said, I think we're both Frans. And I think our reaction to this episode proves it. Like I think we're
both Frans, and we would never leave this wonderful family and the relationships that she's cultivated.
No, I mean, I probably wouldn't even leave a bad job out of guilt. So
that's true.
You know,
he stayed with bunny ears for years. I'm joking, folks. That was a great job.
That was a great job.
It really was. Yeah. So what? Only one left. What are we gonna do?
Well, we have a bit of a surprise coming up for the finale.
No, we don't. We talked about it last episode.
We did. Ah, shit.
Yeah, we spoiled it the last episode. I just edited it. We spoiled
Maybe I'll cut it.
They know Matt is coming.
Okay. Fine. Well, now I have to come up with a new surprise. Maybe I'll get engaged.
Surprise! Next episode, Shawn's unengaged. What'll happen next? Stay tuned.
Okay. Well,
never. I'm gonna cut all this out. This was all terrible. We should just end it.
Just end the whole episode. I just cut this whole up. No, but this was a fantastic episode, and I'm very excited for the finale because I'm kind of curious how they end the season. And I can't believe we've gotten this far. Like it has seemed weirdly effortless, even though we've both put a significant amount of
feels like
work
a fever dream.
Yeah.
I'm excited, and I think the plan is we're just going to keep going. So there's no reason for us to take like too much of a break between the seasons of the show. I think so. We'll just march ever on to the next episode. Just like my man Snoop Dogg says, take it to the next episode.
Why did you have to say that?
I don't know. All right. Good night. Good luck. Check us out on Twitter or on Instagram at Mr. Chef Pod. You can also go to anchor.fm/thenannypod, and you can leave a message or a question or a comment or whatever you want to do. Anyway, I am Shawn. This is Toria, and goodbye forever.
Goodbye.
Just kidding, not forever.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.